This brief segment focuses on Ecuador. The goal of this presentation is to inform you on various aspects of that country in preparation for your upcoming investment decision. There are many aspects of a country that may be relevant to potential investment decisions, and the various languages of a country is the first of such issues. Similarities and/or differences in languages can have a substantial impact on a firm's ability to communicate with local customers, suppliers, and even employees. While Spanish, the dominant language of Ecuador, and Portuguese are clearly distinct languages, they both originate from the same Italo-Western subgroup of languages and share many common words and idioms. Indeed, Portuguese and Spanish share a great number of words that are either spelled identically, although they may be pronounced quite differently, are almost identical, though they may be pronounced more or less the same, or predictably similar. As a result, the two languages are considered to have a considerable degree of mutual intelligibility. A second issue which can influence a firm's ability to conduct business in a foreign country is the dominant religion. Religion has a potentially powerful impact on people's value systems and can influence how they behave and interact with one another. In terms of religious affiliation, it would be difficult to find two more similar countries than Brazil and Ecuador. In both countries, more than 90% of the population claims an affiliation with Roman Catholicism, as has been the case for more than 4 centuries. Similarly, in both countries, the proportion of people claiming religion is very important in their lives is substantially higher than for most developed nations. A third factor which may influence a company's ability to conduct business in a foreign country is the level of industrial development. This not only influences the cost of labor in a country and the consumption patterns, but it also arguably shapes the attitudes, values, and behaviors of the population in general. In terms of the level of economic and industrial development, Brazil and Ecuador are very similar. This holds true whether you measure by the prominence of the service and manufacturing sectors, the GDP per capita, the per capita consumption of energy, or the structure of the telecommunications system. A fourth important issue is the similarities and/or differences in the educational systems of countries. Like in Brazil, in Ecuador, literacy rates are gradually rising, but it is also true that only a small percentage of children in rural areas go to school. Moreover, even in the urban areas, the level of public education is normally inferior, and the middle and upper classes tend to send their children to private schools. Unfortunately, poverty and the lack of schooling contribute to a vicious cycle of illiteracy in many areas of both countries. A fifth critical issue with respect to doing business in another country is similarities and/or differences in the legal and political systems. Both Ecuador and Brazil have systems of government which maintain and function with a division of power and authority among the 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. As is the case in Brazil, in Ecuador, the executive and legislative heads are elected by a popular vote, following a presidential system of government with pluralism, several political parties. The president is elected for a 4-year term with the potential for a second 4-year term. That Ecuadorian president is both the chief of state and the head of government and appoints a cabinet. In the same fashion, the legal systems of both countries share a common origin in the French legal system. A sixth but potentially more subtle issue is similarities and/or differences in actual business practices. This can involve simple but potentially embarrassing issues such as how to properly greet people and attitudes towards time. Brazil and Ecuador have remarkably similar business practices. In both countries, relationships are paramount. The trust between business partners is built up over multiple visits, often including eating together or possibly even visiting a potential business partner's home. Both countries also have similar relaxed attitudes towards time. People and relationships are considered more important than schedules. However, within this relationship context, as in Brazil, some formality is expected in Ecuador. Appointments are expected for meetings. Formal titles such as doctor should be used when appropriate, and hierarchy should be respected. Of course, if all else fails, you can talk about football. The seventh and final issue is the broader set of cultural values which are commonly shared by a large portion of a country's population. Countries can vary in terms of the emphasis placed on individuality versus conformity, the attitudes towards uncertainty and ambiguity, the attitudes towards authority and social inequities, and not least, attitudes towards how gender roles are allocated in society. Not surprisingly, Brazil and Ecuador have very similar cultures. Both countries are very hierarchical and respectful towards authority. This means that upper-level management tends to be treated with much deference and respect. Similarly, people in both countries tend to be uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. This concludes our brief presentation on Ecuador.